Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. John Pollock here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. A few other news and notes to go through. We didn't chat about it on Monday, but also coming out of Saturday night, we had Eric Silva submitting Josh Koscheck. What does your gut say about Josh Koscheck and his next move? This is the end of his UFC contract. Will there be another one coming, or will there be another fight promotion at the top of his next deal?
No, I think Josh Koscheck, I imagine he still wants to fight. Why would you get in there? And I understand you have that performance against Jake Ellenberger. It didn't go the way you wanted to, and then you have this fight with Eric Silva, and I think he looked better than he did in that fight with Jake Ellenberger. And I think if you give Josh Koscheck the right matchups, Mike Piles, Patrick Cotes, some of the older guys at 170 pounds.
If this guy has the money he says he does.
Sure. Fighters want to fight, though. He's been competing in wrestling since he was little. He has that competitive fire. That's what athletes do.
Well, he's not young anymore.
I know. I understand.
I mean, fighting is not something that it's like I'm going to go with my buddies and do a few rounds of golf.
I understand.
I mean, this is something really serious.
Bernard Hopkins didn't need to do it either, but he did it well into his 40s.
To me, if you've got a sizable bank account, you're still young enough that you have your life ahead of you, you've won.
Yeah, I get it.
You can move on. You've done your fighting career, and now it's on to your next phase.
That's true.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I hope every fighter can have that kind of a cushion that they build up from fighting, and then they can move on.
It would be a beautiful thing. That's what people would want for someone else, but that's not necessarily what he wants, because you live your whole life structured around something. You built your entire identity, who you are, what makes you feel good, the striving to compete. You know, remove all of that has been your life for 15 years, and there's a huge hole, you know, which is why over in Thailand, it is not uncommon to look and go, oh, see that guy? He used to be a fighter. That fat, drunk guy who's staggering around on the street because he doesn't know what else to do with his life. It's definitely would make sense. It's like, dude, go enjoy your life. Go have some fun. But this is sort of fun for him, and this is his structure, and this is his identity. And you take that away, you've got to find something else for it. And that's something else. It would be cool if it was just being a millionaire and dating supermodels and stuff, but that's not always enough. It should be, but it isn't.
Well, we'll see if there are going to be any millionaires coming out of this weekend's action. We've got Bellator returning on Friday night. Joe Warren defends his bantamweight championship against Marcus Galvao. This is a rematch from 2011, a fight that many thought that Galvao won, so it does have that interest behind it. And Joe Warren, you know, I spoke with him last week, and he goes back to that Pat Curran fight that we all saw, one of the more violent endings to a fight, which if you
shows you the balls on Joe Warren, though. If you haven't seen this fight, this guy can take a hell of a beating, and he just has that mentality of, I want to win at all costs, and Pat Curran is smashing this guy, but Warren keeps getting up. Oh, it's an awesome performance.
Well, Joe Warren, that was really a turning point for him at that point, and we have seen the success he has had, and somebody as well that has been a product of that tournament system in Bellator, winning both at bantamweight, both at featherweight, and winning championships at the end of those tournaments. So now that Eddie Alvarez is gone, to me, Joe Warren really does represent Bellator to a large degree of people.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that, and it's not just his fighting abilities. Joe Warren, he's good on the mic. He tries to create interest, and I think, you know, for a lot of the hardcore fans, Joe Warren's one of the reasons why people tune in. Bellator just has to get this guy great opponents to make people interested, this casual fan base interested in the product. And I think this fight with Galvao, you know, you can sell the fact that he's a teammate of Jose Aldo and Renan Barão and Eduardo Dantas, former champion. So I think this is good for Bellator.
Yeah, Bellator is still also using some of the old guard and famous names people know and stuff like that. That's all fine and good if the success of that is also getting people to know the Pat Currans who don't already know the Pat Currans and the Joe Warrens out of it. That's what you have to do.
Do you think that they're being successful thus far? Because that's the blueprint, or are we even going to know this early in the game where it's going to be 2015 that I think we look at the end of the year of how successful was Bellator with this formula. It certainly worked for Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner. Is it going to be diminishing returns with bringing back other names from the past?
Right now, I'll be honest, I look at the Bellator product, and every time I look at the card, it's like, okay, where is Scott Coker's influence here? We're not seeing what we saw in Strikeforce, and I think when people found out that Scott Coker was on board with Bellator, they were expecting to see that. It just hasn't worked out that way, and maybe, like you said...
What would you like to see more of?
Just more of these spectacle-type matchups. You know, of course, they look at building their own stars. Gilbert Melendez was built in Strikeforce. Jake Shields was built in Strikeforce. We've seen Robbie Lawler there. there. We saw Cain Velasquez start his career there. So I think the focus is, Scott Coker has his relationship with American Kickboxing Academy as well as San Diego's Alliance team. So the focus is to bring all the up-and-coming talent from there and then focus on building your spectacle matches like Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock. But the goal is to make sure that there's quality matchups underneath that.
The trick for me is that what we might see as success as a fan is very different from what the monster of a business sees as success, which is that more money comes in than money that goes out. The balance sheet at the end of it has a plus on it. And if that's what they're doing, that doesn't really require us to approve of it. At the end of it, it's like all of these different sources of income come in. They don't the machine that is a company doesn't necessarily care if we're entertained as long as we spend money. And that's what happens, I think, when you have a giant company like Viacom.
But are people going to spend money? Is Bellator right now a destination? If you're 2 hours outside of a city where Bellator is going to be, are you investing that 2-hour drive plus the money spent on tickets and hotels to go and see this show? Because we all know that people are doing it for the UFC. People are driving 5 hours to go see the UFC. And I think it comes down to Bellator creating a product that's hot enough for people to say, you know what, I'm willing to take the trek, I'm willing to spend the money.
I think that with Bellator and World Series of Fighting, I mean, you are going to find these weekends coming up where there is no UFC, these are definitely the exception rather than the rule. And I think you go back to Strikeforce, where there was a lot more free time amongst MMA fans that they were seeking out a lot more. I don't know how much more MMA people are seeking out on their own that are just good fights. You have to give them those extra compelling reasons. And despite I'm not a big fan of the fight, Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock is going to represent that to a lot of people who are like, I don't know what's going to happen in this fight, but I certainly want to see it. And that's kind of the direction you have to go, where it's really just finding a shiny object to put in front of fans' eyes that are going to get your attention diverted from the UFC, even if it's fleeting.
And that's why they talked about trying to get Brock Lesnar, and Bobby Lashley is just re-signed with the organization. And if they can somehow manage to get Cyborg, they can create interest, and they just develop their own stars and have these big fights that everybody says, oh, I want to see her, I want to see Ken Shamrock, and then you hide the undercard, load the undercard with some of your big stars who will be bigger stars once the casual fans tune in.
Yeah, but it's like, look, this thing's shiny. Look at it. It sparkles. I mean, that's a tough sell. Look, see, shiny. It's a tough sell to just try to get people to look at shiny objects all the time. You really hope you build an infrastructure and more of a permanent, niche of fans. That's the hard part.
Fans love shiny.
That's right.
They love looking at that stuff. More Fight News Now Extra is coming up. Don't hope that we lose your attention.